At Harrison Armory, they're all about coming up with creative solutions to a set of particular problems, but overall things that affect the purview. And the armory at large, the average life of your citizen, a new kind of microwave, and a troublesome thing on the front lines, how to stop bullets. Usually in the sense of high armor, or, shoot them before they shoot you. But this is Harrison Armory, we go further than just IPS-N's heavy plating. No, you see, HA took some of its scientists, its think tank, took all its tech that it gathered, and those leftover Blinkgate scientists from you, and they thought about how they couldn't really damage or shoot a Blinkgate. So why not put it in front of something? Hi, hello, and welcome back to Lancer, our favorite mech tabletop RPG, where today we're talking about the small, nimble, and very angry, maybe not nimble, the Napoleon. Yeah, nimble was not the right word. Tanky. Very tanky. Armadillo? Too angry to die? Or too small and too angry to die? Average height for a human, just not a mech. But HA's little wonder project. A whole mix of different paracausal tech, alongside some of their other mixes of paracausal and advanced war tech. The Napoleon, however, is outfitted to be equipped by a normal person. Still a mech pilot, still, Lancer in their own right, but not directly designed for open battlefield roles. It will still be used for those and has systems for those, but the Napoleon was actually designed for a guard position or breach position. Boarding on vessels, it's designed for a similar purpose as the Caliban. Well, Napoleon's for surviving going through those doors and tight hallways. The Caliban's all about making sure there's nothing left in those hallways. But the places you would actually see Napoleon are again on breaches on the front line, purview, not just on ships but on ships. Regularly equipped by think tank security, so when you bust into that place, know you're fighting multiple Napoleons. And lastly, the Union Economic Bureau. It's another third comp contract. Which, before even getting to the stats, I just want to get across, you'd find this walking around in a city, or in the think tank, or in high security places within HA. Barbarossa, only seeing on the battlefield, similar thing to the Nelson, but the Napoleon you'll see in a building. It's meant to be that small because it's meant to be used or carried around by a normal person. Mundane security, where you send someone to another dimension. But our next license, the ankle breaker Napoleon. So what we're covering within this video is the lore of the chassis itself, but then the actual mechanics. Everything that's a part of its license. So the chassis, you get an LL2 of a license out of 3, and everything else is systems that you can attach to any other chassis. But with that, the chassis as compared to the Everest. The starting frame, you get a LL0. Low on health, similar to the Goblin at 6, because again, it's just a person, even if it's armored. But that's actually what's helping it survive these hits. It's not just tanky from having a heavy amount of physicality and being able to take hits from redundant systems. It has armor. It's 2 armor on a size half chassis. Throw in some of the additional traits and additional systems later on, and you're very tanky. All these other bonuses are a bit minor. That heat cap, though, you are really going to need later. A low repair capacity due to being a very, very high-tech suite. Very top-end stuff and delicate systems, some of the later things in the license being restricted to trusted HA personnel, and low sensors because of all of the projection systems it has. So instead of cameras and sensors, you're relying on all these field generators, which is kind of blocking the sensors. You've seen the arrows, you've seen the stats, and moving on to the mounts and size. So obviously, being Napoleon, it's a bit of a nod to its size. It's size half. Average for a person, average for a pilot, just not a mech. Though due to how small it is and just kind of being what a person is instead of having this entire weapon suite strapped to it, it's only got a main aux mount, so a bit limited on what you can actually equip. For its first trait, we have heavy shielding, so on a successful save or check to reduce damage or reduce it down to half, you instead reduce it to 1, stretching that 6 health very far. Started to actually damage the thing. Next up is Flash Aegis, so if you begin bracing, essentially hunkering down or preparing for an attack or a hit, when you would normally gain resistance, you instead reduce all incoming damage to 1, similar to the previous trait. As it's not just physically bracing or having high armor, it's preparing your Aegis systems to be able to block it or absorb it. That blink space projection. But speaking of that blink space projection and the Aegis, onto its core power. True Black Aegis, so for this we're actually going to go on a little history lesson detour for the Napoleon. So the Napoleon is actually a very interesting chassis. It's in the middle of a lot of things. It has a bunch of different design principles and elements from other chassis and other connections to things inside Harrison Armory, and the overall technology within Lancer. Harrison Armory at the cutting edge of tech, or at least trying to be on the warfront. But the Napoleon you can kind of see is in the middle of a line of development. So with energy shielding being a very limited thing within Lancer, nowhere near the levels that you find in other sci-fi like Halo for example, there aren't any immediate shields you can just strap on and have projected over you like in Borderlands, or on a ship, or on power armor. Well, actually, that's the exceptions. You can have brief ones or very unstable ones. Energy shielding is a cutting edge tech, same with hard light. All of this leading to the Saladin, having early energy field projection systems and other systems resulting around hard light and tachyon shields. So you can kind of follow this development line from the Saladin protecting others, the shield projectors going to the projectors and personal defense of the Napoleon. The actual tech of the Napoleon coming from a mix of the think tank and some old SecCom scientists. As various members were running away from Cradle as some kind of operation. Similar to how Harrison got his hands on some of the earliest and most advanced mech development because they took Ross Shamraw, well, as all those SecCom members were fleeing and occasionally joining under Harrison, some of those members had worked on blink gates and blink gate technology. Under SecCom and even under ThirdCom, still a very, very closely guarded secret. Nothing as grand as the proper projections to actually make a blink gate as far as we know, but enough to have the workings, then feeding that into the think tank and you get the Napoleon, given the initial prompt from the start of the video. And I described the Napoleon as in the middle, having possibly derived some of its original designs and mechanics from good old Saladin, and then taking that adapted blink space tech and using some information from the Voladores to make the Sunze. But given that chain of development, back to the Napoleon itself and the think tank, it's another black box system. Something super complex that the think tank churned out and can replicate. Now actually back to the mechanics of what the think tank made. The true black Aegis essentially makes this small bubble of unstable blink space fields. Not one entire field. It doesn't really make it through because you basically just put a portal in front of the projectile. So you have the activate Aegis. So as this activates, it's a field closely in line with your chassis. This true black or blindness of the blink. And for the rest of the scene, you reduce all incoming damage down to 1 unless it avoids reduction, as all those traits are now applying to any damage you take. Again, making that 6 health stretch very far. You gain immunity to all tech actions, hostile or beneficial, except for the ones internal to you because nothing can reach you through the field, even allies wanting to help. But if it's sourced from you, the chassis inside the field still happens. Though even with the tech on the inside, the only systems you can use are the ones with the shield tag. Anything else that needs to be activated is deactivated, though things that don't need to be activated are unaffected. You also can't take quick actions, full actions, or reactions unless it's from the following things: a standard move, a grapple, a ram, an improvised attack, activating any of those shield systems mentioned earlier, and any skill checks and boosts. You also can't overcharge. And just like with the tech actions from earlier, disconnected from any kind of comms, you can't communicate with your group, you can also still receive statuses in heat and also be affected by involuntary movement. Now other than all of that, you can still interact with the world normally. That's a good hunk of things to keep track of. Even with all the possible debuffs on that, hey, you're immune to tech actions, that's kind of here or there. Reducing all incoming damage to 1. All. The Napoleon is just tanky. Yes, you have true black Aegis, but even taking some of the traits from earlier, this thing can just stand in front of a Barbarossa, be hit with the Apocalypse Rail, and it's 1 damage. Good amount of time spent on just the chassis, even though it's packed with goodies. We have the good old systems with LL1, and kicking it off, we have Stasis Bolt at 1 system point. Now the Stasis Bolt system might sound like a weapon or projectile, it kind of is, but it doesn't do any damage, and it doesn't target people. This bolt instead affects other projectiles. So it counts as a shield system and requires a quick action to actually charge up to prepare a reaction, granting the interdiction point reaction, which actually lasts for the rest of the scene. So you don't actually need to charge it for the upcoming round, you just charge it as 1 action, and until you use it, the 1 charge you can hold per that scene, it lasts. Until expended, obviously, or the scene ends. So you can actually trigger the reaction by spending a charge if you or an ally within 5 spaces of you is hit by an attack, or is being attacked. Specifically ranged, this doesn't block melee. But as the projectile is coming in, you fire the stasis bolt, it hits the projectile and freezes it in place, eliminating all inertia, and then just harmlessly drops, the attack just missing. However, for it to work, you actually need to make a contested attack roll to hit the projectile. So you could charge this up, spend this reaction, and then just miss. You or your ally still hit. But as a reaction, just having the chance to stop 1 attack in its entirety, especially if it's a heavy hitter like a railgun shot, or other some kind of heavy or range or artillery enemy, not to mention just the tech of it, it uses the stasis generator technology and just stops it. Next up is the stasis generator for 2 system points. So the difference between the stasis bolt and the stasis generator is the bolt is targeting the ammunition hitting a target, and the generator is targeting, well, the target, or the person attacking the target. Once again, counting as a shield system, being triggered on a quick action, and you need to target a character, either enemy or allied, within range 5, and line of sight. And once triggered, you freeze them like the projectile, so until the end of their next turn, they are static, they are stunned, they are immune to all damage and effects, can't be moved, targeted, affected by anything, or affected by other characters. So it's not just holding them in place, it's not restraining them in some sense, it is static matter. Frozen, to the point that any other matter or energy attempting to interact with it just doesn't. Immovable object. There are some limits to it, so if it's a hostile character, obviously they make some kind of save, which is engineering. Or even then, when it comes to allied characters, it can only affect each character once per scene, including the enemy. It's also a unique system like the Stasis Bolt. But a good potential disabler, basically banishment, or banishing them for a round. Or in the case of an ally, if you know they are going to get hit, they are going to suffer massive, massive damage, or some kind of terrible effect, you can protect them. Also, as a part of its description, has a fantastic excerpt of a poem from Creighton's world. You know, the whole... Anywho, moving on to LL2. the Phase Ready mod at 2 system points. So it's another mod, here's all the weapons and mounts it can affect. And it's quite a strange one. I would say it uses blink space technology or blink gate travel, but it doesn't. Not quite. So what it is, before the mechanics of it, it's a very specific set of ammunition and weapon, obviously, but it comes down to the point of each of its projectiles having a computer on the inside, having all of its superpositional data. When it's fired and beginning to exit the barrel, all of a sudden all of that data from the end of the barrel is transferred to a doppelganger. Initially hypothetical, but then phasing into reality next to the enemy. A potential bullet, a potential projectile that did hit its target. And it didn't teleport, the bullet exists in 2 places at once, at the end of the barrel and in front of the enemy. That is terrifying, even its description briefly referencing a nickname it gained on Luna de Oro, the Devil's Bullet. Now after talking about how ridiculous that concept is, talking on to the mechanics and how that reflects. So as you're firing with this mod, as long as you know the rough location of your target, you can fire through walls and obstacles and don't need line of sight. You ignore all benefits of cover, however, because you're kind of guesstimating where they are, they count as invisible, so the 50-50 flip. But you can shoot through walls, not through seeing it, but the fact that the bullet is just appearing behind it. It's kind of like the TR-116, the weapon that teleports a solid projectile from the barrel past any kind of shielding. Used to a similar effect here, just on the scale of mech weaponry. Next up is Stasis Barrier for 2 system points. It's a quick action to shield, and just like the other 2 stasis, it's just that on a larger scale. A barrier, if you would. So once again, a unique system, limited 1 on active deployment, and it's 4x4 with 1 space at least adjacent to you. So for a size half mech, that's very big. After deploying it, instead of affecting an individual projectile or attack, or holding down an enemy or ally in some kind of stasis field so they're immune to everything else on the outside, it's a mixture of artificial gravity manipulation to affect things on a molecular level, blocking waves and molecules. Given its own description, basically when matter hits it, it stops existing, ceases to be, though given the wall's fluctuations, some stuff can get through. But because it's a field of energy and anti-gravity, it's immune to all damage with the barrier itself. The barrier counts as an obstruction, so stopping any kind of physical movement through it. Also counts as soft cover. It doesn't block line of sight because you can still see through it, kinda similar to the defensive magnetic wall of the Black Witch, but with a big additional benefit. So if an attack actually goes to hit any kind of character benefiting from the soft cover, a d6 is rolled, and on a 4+, the attack is just consumed by the barrier. Again, that matter ceases to exist, those waves of energy are dispersed, and it just didn't hit. Doesn't matter how big it was, that matter did not make it through that barrier. The barrier itself lasts for the rest of the scene or until dismissed, and the defensive benefits don't stack with invisibility. You're already rolling a dice 50-50 essentially on 4+ to just get rid of something. Having 2 coin flips would be pretty ridiculous. But with all that, we're here to LL3 with the Displacer, a main rifle, and one of the main reasons I'm so excited for Napoleon, outside of all its defensive goodies, the Displacer is just such a fun gun, because it's not quite a gun. So, it has a range of 10 and a blast of 1, and does 10 flat energy damage. Flat! No rolling, and then you can still add additional bonus damage and bonus dice. And on top of all that, armor piercing! AP, 10 flat energy damage AP, range of 10, blast of 1. And that's because it's not really shooting. Now there's some additional tags and mechanics I haven't touched on yet because I think it's better with the description in mind. Because what is the Displacer? That doesn't sound like a rifle name. In fact, how's it doing that much damage with that blast? You can see the weapon. It's what the Napoleon's wielding. So the Displacer actually has more relation to a blink gate than a weapon. Still a weapon, used as a weapon, very effective as a weapon, but mechanically similar to the mechanics of a blink gate. Because it's taking that advanced tech and standard practices of FTL at the moment, and deciding to force a blink space rupture. But this takes a ton of power, requiring a dorsal reactor. One of the 2 main reasons this can't be wielded by just a normal person, even though it's roughly sized for normal arms. But once you have that reactor and the power to operate it, you aim at the location, ad hoc, again, just like a rifle. No advanced systems or anything, you just pick a location, a rough sphere is then taken from the Displacer, and boom! It's gone. That bubble of 3-dimensional reality is gone. It ceases to exist in this dimension. It's now somewhere in the blink. There is no exit gate. There is no travel. It's just gone. It's a one-way trip to the blink, represented by 10 energy damage. And man, that sucks for the ground pounders at 1 health. A squad usually has 10 health. Another strange part of it, there's no actual noise from the firing itself, because again, it's not a projectile. There's no explosion sending a bit of lead down range. It's just a brief moment of silence from where the target was, and then the violent cooldown of the Displacer on the chassis. Because that's the second reason for why someone can't just normally hold this, is because of the cooldown, which would just normally burn you alive. And to represent this difficulty of maintenance are the other tags on the Displacer. So you have loading, due to its cooldown and needing to prep it. Unique, because it's such a delicate, high-tech, and experimental system from HA. And then when you fire it, heat 10 to self. heat 10. On a biological target, heat immediately turns into damage. So if a normal person was holding this, yeah, they're gone, requiring the chassis to hold the dorsal reactor and just handle the heat. But if you paid attention to the start, the base Napoleon stats cannot handle the heat of the displacer. Firing this thing one time at base immediately brings stress to the reactor, meaning if you fire it multiple times, there's a non-zero chance your entire mech self-destructs from firing this weapon. Just such a ridiculous weapon, it's so much fun. And while really good for combat, you can just open holes through walls this way. Just take a chunk of wall out of the way. Not needing to breach it physically, it's just gone. And lastly, we have Blink Shield for 2 system points. So another shield system that's not based off stasis tech, instead it's back to the Aegis in the Blink. So instead of the small, brief flickering of the Aegis that can then form a large bubble or coating around you, allowing you to still interact with reality, this just makes a brief blink gate that you can just step in and stand in. Or not step in, you are the center of it when it generates. But you're both in real space and not. Your unmomentary unexistence, as it's written in the description, is beneficial for defense. So once again, it's a shield system, requiring a full action to trigger. That same true black, blindness, or void from the blink forms in a 4-space bubble around you, or a 4-burst bubble around you. Nothing can enter or leave the bubble, not even light, it's impermeable. It's just pure blink space, so it's immune to all damage and effects. Line of sight can't be drawn through it because it's that same void or blindness of the blink, and nothing can actually enter it. No action, no effect, not even things that don't require line of sight like teleporting. Teleporting can't even make it through here. And that void and immunity to travel and effect stuff also applies for other mechs on the inside. So you can't shoot out while they can't shoot in. It's just a solid barrier. Though when it initially forms and mechs are partially within the area, they make an agility save and then can pick what side they're on. Otherwise, you pick for them. And while it's a burst and you are at the center of it, you can move after it forms. And then it lasts until the end of your next turn, buying some possibly necessary breathing room for you and your allies, or separating one of the enemies with you and your allies on the inside. And the system is again unique, a lot of unique systems on the Napoleon, and heat 4 to self as it generates. But that was the Napoleon, the small wonder tech bundle of Harrison Armory. While impressive just from the various bits of sci-fi tech that have been utilized for a war environment, which were previously used for either preserving oneself in Lancer versions of cryo with stasis, experiments with anti-gravity to again form these massive barriers to stop things from forming or hitting, then taking the tech from blink space and blink fields, and instead of using that for the FTL travel, adapting that to shielding. Put a portal in front of you so it absorbs or at least sends the damage somewhere else. All of it in this tiny, angry little mech. And as we make fun of it, and similar jabs to the actual naming scheme of it, the Napoleon, even mentioned within the description that it's probably a jab. It's, however, terrifying. Because once again, while yes, in the game you're using this, fighting other mechs, other chassis, the Napoleon is designed for a guard role, a breach role, a boots-on-the-ground, heavy-armored personnel. A soldier that can go through any minefield. No door is an obstacle as it suddenly vanishes into another dimension. Any kind of protection you thought you had is gone as a bullet teleports in front of you. And even as you have a chance to retaliate, it uses breaking into another dimension as its armor. You aren't taking down the Napoleon. It's not just some wonder project. It's not some kind of scientist wanting to put together some project with all this high-tech goodies and experimental workings. Because this isn't the cavalry. This isn't a weapon of war. This is a man in a suit with a weapon that requires its own back reactor that you never hear fire, that sends you to another dimension. Thank you for watching the video on the Napoleon. Took a bit. Also, wow, thank you for 40k. I do have some loose idea of a video, but back to the Napoleon and just the sheer just such a fun bit of taking other sci-fi tech and like, how can we weaponize this? Because that's just a great expression of HA. Good old Harrison armories. Because yes, you have anti-gravity or gravity manipulation from the Iskander, and that's weaponized, used for a battlefield role. But when it comes to the blink, you don't really think about it that much, on how that could potentially be weaponized. And then the Napoleon is the answer to that. Same with the stasis generators. And then the phase ready mod, it's just a bundle of terrifying sci-fi equipment. Again, stored on a person that acts as the think tank security wear these things. There's pilots of these in the think tank security. You're not going against some random GMS chassis or some mangled together thing when you go and break into the think tank. You're fighting whatever other guards are there, and then Napoleons. Plural. With displacers. A single chunk of 10 damage hurts, an entire set of Napoleons firing a displacer, that's going to send you away. But once again, thank you for watching, a thank you to my patrons, and have a nice day.